Hi, this is Rodrigo from Frame Freak Studio, and this is a creative hostler show. Today's guest is Paul Muiris. He is a writer, animator, and director at Cartoon Saloon, and he has helped them to produce films like Eddie and the Real Eternal. He's working on the new film Wolf Walker, and recently has been working with the guys at Sound Creature Studios, the ones who have created the animations The Reward. So, welcome.
Thanks, Rodrigo. Thanks for having me on.
First of all, for the people who don't know about you, can you start telling us about your history and how you got involved into art, into animation, and doing all this?
Sure. Okay, so I was one of the animation kids. I was like someone who decided I saw The Jungle Book when I was like 5, and I decided that that's what I wanted to do. Like I decided that right there and then, that's what I was going to do. When I grew up, I didn't really know what it was. I didn't really understand how animation was made, but I decided that's what I was going to do. And from then on, I kind of got obsessed with like anything that was animation, any behind the scenes type things, things like that. And I spent all my time drawing, like copying the Disney characters and copying Warner Brothers characters, especially Chuck Jones stuff. And then I'd make up my own characters, kind of ripping off their characters and that kind of thing, and put them in their own situation. So it was a lot of that kind of thing. It was a lot of the classic kind of, little kid dreams. And then because I'm a very stubborn person, I decided to keep it into adulthood. So,
And so far, we have interviewed a lot of people from the United States and a couple from Europe, but Ireland has like a very unique history because it was in a rough situation like some years ago, and now it's like growing and a lot of really great things are happening there. How did you found it for you to grow into art, into animation in this country?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing to happen, or kind of the thing that started animation in Ireland was the Don Bluth studios, like Sullivan Bluth, who were making like Land Before Time and things like that. They had a studio in Ireland, and Don Bluth basically set up a college called Ballyfermot College of Art. And basically that's the college that I went to. That's the college that the guys who set up Cartoon Saloon went to, the guys who set up Brown Bag went to. Most of the studios that have been set up in Ireland, or most of the slightly older ones, all kind of owe a debt in some way to this one studio having been set up. So that's how it all started. When I was coming out of college, or basically when I was in college, we found out that the Disney studios had just closed. Like there was no more 2D. 2D was dead. It was exactly around then when basically they decided to throw out all their animators, throw out all their desks, and basically just proclaim that was the end of hand-drawn animation. And I was a kid who'd like, all I'd wanted to do growing up was hand-drawn animation, and I was finally in college learning hand-drawn animation, and then I was kind of told that that's the end of that. So that was kind of a bit disheartening. So then in Ballyfermot College, we were very much classically trained. Like everything was pencil and paper, everything was traditional painting techniques, things like that. And then we also were doing some CG. But in terms of the 2D animation we were doing and the 2D education we had, it was very much a classical education and not at all an education for the climate of the time. So basically, when I finished college and I got out and I kind of wanted to work in 2D animation, I didn't know Flash. I had a very brief understanding of what I taught myself, of Photoshop, those kind of things. So basically, people came out in the year that I came out. We all kind of came out to a big shock because we realized we were being trained for kind of an industry that didn't really exist anymore. So from that, if that's what you mean, from that perspective, I would say that there wasn't a whole lot of work then, but the only work that was going on was very much about Flash and very much about that kind of thing. And like there was studios like Boulder were doing shows like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, things like that. But in terms of, say, Cartoon Saloon at the time, they were only doing adverts and shorts, and it was pretty much the same thing with Brown Bag and people like that. So in terms of Irish animation at the time, in terms of getting work, there wasn't really a whole lot going on.
Still now, Ireland has become like a really great country. A lot of great industries are there, big companies that some of them we are trying to target to them to get some work from them. And now I see that Cartoon Saloon with in Kilkenny, they are putting like Lighthouse Studios, and they are like they have become the guys who carry the flag, I see, into
Yeah, very
growing
much so.
the industry of animation in Ireland. How do you see the opportunities today for 2D animation?
Today, it's a completely different story. I think as well as the fact that you had like people like the guys in Saloon when they brought out Kells. I mean, that was a big thing for Irish animation. And I think specifically, I think that year, the year that Kells was nominated for the Oscar, I think that was a very big thing, because I remember at the time there was basically 5 Oscar nominees that all came from the same college. So, and like 2 of them being Paul and Tom from Saloon. So basically, at that point, they realized, okay, well, we have look at the great things that Irish animation is doing, and then they kind of looked at the actual funding they were putting into animation, which was very, very small in terms of the funding they had for film. They were putting very, very little amounts into Irish animation. So I think, I don't know how much that changed, but definitely the people's perception of animation changed a lot around then, and I think that made a huge difference. And I think on a world platform, I think it definitely changed people's opinion of what was going on in Ireland. Because I think before that, we'd only really been we'd only been a country for service studios, and I think now we were saying that we had a voice and we had something to say.
And what is it about 2D animation and Candidal animation that you like the most?
It's a good question. I mean, the thing is, the projects that I do myself, the thing is, I've worked as an animator a long time ago, but I don't animate anymore. Mostly because I tried to find people who are much better at me than animating, at animating. But the reason that I really push the 2D animation in the projects that I do is because I feel like that's what I connected to as a kid. And I think one of the reasons I connected to it is not just the fact that it feels alive, and you can feel the pressure of an artist's pencil. You can feel you haven't got the same kind of homogenized feeling you sometimes get from CG. So I think basically what's coming out of that is the fact that if you're a little kid watching those shows or watching those short films or whatever, you feel like you can draw what's on screen. It's not that intangible to you. Like if you're looking at a CG character going through a lit scene, it's very hard to understand as a child what that is. But I think when they put out Song of the Sea and things like that, you can see that there was lots of kids doing fan art. And even when I did Eddie of the Realms, you can see there's a lot of like fan art and stuff on if you do Google searches, and it's lots of kids just seeing this stuff and then drawing it because they just want to they want to be part of the conversation. You know what I mean? They feel like this is something that they understand, and they feel like this is something that they can play with themselves and take the same characters and put them into different situations the same way as I did when I was a kid. You know what I mean? I think that's important. I think it has to be kind of a dialogue back and forth with you and the audience, and I think the medium itself, I think, is part of that. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Also, for people who are starting out into this industry, into animation and all this, what are the most common mistakes that you see most people doing that they are not aware that they are doing?
I would say a big thing is okay, I think you've got like 2 sides of it. You've got people who are trying to make what they think is an animation portfolio, and because of that, sometimes the work is just very generic because they're literally trying to tick the boxes of what they think you're supposed to do. And then you've got the other people who kind of want to show this is who they are, and they kind of go so far the other way that they're doing like, you know, charcoal drawings that aren't really based on physicality or something. Like that. They're doing very abstract drawings that maybe don't really show what it is they could add to a production. You know what I mean? Like if you're pitching a short film with work like that, that makes sense. But I think basically, if you're doing a portfolio or something like that, the people on the other side are always on your side. They always want to hire you. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I've spent a lot of time looking through like hundreds of reels, looking for people for projects, and that's the thing. Like everyone, I want to open the reel and see this is the best person ever, and I can just hire them and that's it. Because you don't want to look through hundreds of reels, or if you are, you want to look through hundreds of good reels. But the thing is, often you're finding work that isn't really saying anything. You're finding very technical work. You're finding or you're finding reels that are very long. You know what I mean? You're finding reels that like everybody's trying to put everything they have into the reels rather than focusing on the stuff that's particularly good. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think the thing when there's, I think when people ask questions like that, I think the thing is, it's nearly always the same answer to those kind of things. And I think the reason that is because people are looking for that golden ticket answer. I mean, they're kind of, I assume some people are, say, watching this interview because they're hoping I'll say something that will spark something in their mind, and now they'll just understand what that is. They'll understand what storytelling is, or they'll understand what putting a portfolio is in. And it's not really that. If you look at a lot of, like, I watch a lot of interviews with directors and writers and things like that, and I think I'm doing the same thing. I think, you know, subconsciously I'm always looking for that little thing that they'll say something and suddenly it'll all click and I'll become like as good as they are. But really, the reason the advice I just gave is so cliched is because that is kind of the only real way you can go about it. The only way you can go about it is to try figure out what is your best work, how can you get that shown, and basically to show how can you be of use to the production who you want to hire you and who wants to hire you. You know what I mean? I think those are when it comes down to it, that's really what you try and do when you build a portfolio.
Definitely. For me, well, I do get this thing that you say about finding the magic thing that will fix everything, because even in entrepreneurship, you see it a lot, like a lot of people trying to find the magic thing that will make them a lot of sales and a lot of projects and things like that. Although I already gave up on finding that a long time ago. However, being into this position is like really great because, for example, asking this question to you and then asking it to Tom Moore or Fred Seibert and things like that is, for me, it's like a puzzle. Like every once and then there's somebody who comes up with something really great, and that I can use it into this puzzle to make it a little bit better. But definitely, I think you mentioned something really important there about the need for finding the magic thing that will solve everything, and I think that doesn't exist, definitely.
Yeah, and I think all of these things are subjective as well. I think, you know, one person could watch this and get something out of it, and hopefully something useful, but I think the next person could just get nothing out of it at all because maybe we're not simpatico in terms of what it is we want, you know what I mean?
Yes. Also, what are the challenges that you found during your career into animation that you didn't expect to find?
Well, I guess one thing would be that often when I listen to interviews again like this, and people generally have quite like, especially I think people in the States, I think have quite a direct line from college into studios. Whereas for me, for instance, when I left college, I just assumed, okay, I'd leave college and I'll go into animation, that's what I'll do. But actually, when I left college, my first job was I was working as a pitch boarder, so I was doing storyboards for pitch adverts for Guinness and people like that. And then within literally a month of leaving college, I actually ended up working as a sculptor. So basically, someone had seen my drawings, who I'd known through someone else, and they basically said, if you can draw like that, you can sculpt. So they hired me as a sculptor. So then I was now basically working on pitch boards in my spare time, and I was working full time as a sculptor. After that, I illustrated some children's books. I did some concept design. I did various other things, and then that was all in the space of, say, 1 year. And then I realized that, okay, I want to go back to college. I want to get more savvy in terms of filmmaking, because that was not something that I got from Ballyfermot. So then I went to Edinburgh College of Art, and there basically it was completely the opposite of, say, something like Ballyfermot, which was incredibly structured. If you imagine Ballyfermot was like much more like school, like you go class to class, every day you're just going through, you have 9 modules to complete and you have to be certain places at certain times. In Edinburgh, it was much more about, here's your desk, here's your deadline in a very broad way, and you can do, like, you have a project, but you can do it in stop motion, paint on glass, you can do cutouts, you can do 2D, you can do whatever you want, but it's more about forming who you are. When I left there, I was actually hired as a sculptor at the Edinburgh Dungeons, and then I actually ended up being the carpenter there, basically building props. So I ended up building like torture devices, like all kinds of crazy things, and like dead bodies, corpses with like intestines hanging out, and all kinds of crazy props and things like that. And then worked as a motion graphics artist, then worked as a storyboarder, all the time while I was putting myself through college being a barman. Then came back to Ireland. I saw that basically Cartoon Saloon were looking for a compositor. So I typed into Google, what's a compositor? Because I didn't know. And then realized that actually the live action films I've been making with my friends that I've been editing and doing special effects on and all that kind of thing, I realized that basically just the things I've been doing to kind of fill in the gap because we had like basically no money. I actually realized that was compositing. And that's the first job I did at Saloon was I was a compositor on an advert. And that's actually how I got in. So in a weird way, so my point is in terms of this, the strangest things that happened in terms of me working in animation, or what I found working in animation was the fact that when I left college, I thought, okay, I will just go from A to B, just go from college to animation. And actually, I ended up going from here to here to here and all over the map before I came back to animation. And at the time when I was doing those things, I really felt that all the time animation was what I wanted to do. And now in the last few years, like last nearly 5.5 years I've been at Saloon, I think it's those times that I draw on the most in terms of inspiration or in terms of education and in terms of what I learned in that period of time. Those are the things that I draw on more than my everyday things that I'm doing. So I guess to answer your question in a very roundabout way, I think it's the fact that, yeah, there's no, if you feel that you want to work in animation but you're doing other things, keep going towards it and try to find other things that you can aim your creativity into. And you will find later that actually doing those other things that aren't animation will always feed back into it, and feed back into your filmmaking, and feed back into shaping you as a director or an artist or whatever. But does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely.
It was a very long answer, but yeah.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Also, there is something, thanks to the internet, like things are changing a lot. We got Kickstarter, we got Amazon now, we got Netflix. There are more streaming services that are coming. For example, I just read that Disney wants to launch its own streaming services for 2019. And I wanted to ask you about how do you perceive these changes and how it is different now going into all these new services in the internet than from the traditional industry that was settled like when you were going out of college?
Sure. Do you mean the access that people have to that kind of medium? Like, do you mean the access that people have to animated films, or do you mean the difference between watching something in the theater versus watching it online or streaming?
No, actually, about the opportunities for people like you and I. Like, for example, I read that Eddie from the Reels Eternal was a script sent in the United States to Amazon, and that Amazon hired Cartoon Saloon in order to get it done, and you were involved in that project.
Sure, I understand.
On the other side, the guys from Sun Creature did the Kickstarter. I read that they tried to do it through Amazon, but they were trying to change the script too much. So they went to the Kickstarter again and Patreon, I think, and pretty much got a series that is like really awesome. So how do you feel like this affects people like you and I and other people in the world through all these new opportunities?
Sure, I think I mean, to be honest, I think it's great. I think anybody out there, swinging to try and make more animated series, to give more people who have an original voice, to give them an opportunity to make a TV series. I think it's great, because I think for quite a long time we've been kind of limited to Disney and Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, those types of things. And like Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, when they started out, I mean, they were quite groundbreaking and they were trying so many new things. But obviously, as happens with everything, as they go on, then they become the solid guys. Now they don't really experiment as much anymore, and that kind of thing. So you always need new blood. You need new people coming up, and you need people like, I think, Amazon and Netflix, who are kind of pushing against Disney and Nickelodeon and all those guys, and kind of like trying to change what they're consolidating as acceptable animation. And I think, yeah, I mean, having worked with Amazon, I would say that I think they were really good to work with, which is great. I mean, I wasn't. I'm not just saying that because I work with them, but I think no, I was surprised. I think the way they're doing things is really good. They give me a lot of leeway that I think some of the studios who've been in place for longer, I think, wouldn't have given. I think because Amazon and Netflix are still quite new, they're still quite open to change. They're still quite open to what they're going to be. They're still quite open to what their voice is and the kind of shows they make. Whereas I would say there's definitely shows you could pitch to Amazon that you couldn't pitch to, say, Disney or Cartoon Network, purely because it would have to fit in aesthetically what they do or thematically what they do. You know what I mean? So I think having new kids on the block who want to do different things and can open that whole thing up, I think that's great. I think the more the merrier.
Also, do you think it's harder, easier, or just different?
You mean to work for them or to?
Yeah. Or to be next to them?
Well, in my experience, it was easier to work with them because they were quite open in terms of. They were quite open in terms of feedback and in terms of changing things and in terms of yeah, just, I mean, letting us make the creative decisions. I think I think other studios may have wanted to step on our toes a bit more with those decisions, and I think we were very gracious that they just kind of gave us space and let us do what we do well. You know what I mean? So I think that was great.
Also, what are the pros and cons that you feel there is, like going into independent or going into another studio like even Amazon or Netflix?
Sure.
What will be the difference between going independent and going through one of them will be?
Well, when you say independent, what do you mean? You mean independent for a series?
Like Sun Creature, that when they did the Kickstarter and now they have to do everything on their own, in opposite to having your show being pitched into another company and having their support.
Sure, I understand. Yeah, and I suppose you should probably mention that we've spoken about this already, but the last studio I just worked for was Sun Creature, because I think people watching this will be wondering why you keep bringing up Sun Creature. Yes, so yes, I know the guys in Sun Creature, and I know what you're talking about. I think that it's a huge difference to have a studio support behind you, because if you're coming in as an independent, if you're coming in as someone who just has an idea or as a concept or whatever else, to Amazon or Netflix or something like that, you're I don't want to say you're a liability, but you're basically somebody who doesn't really bring a whole lot with them other than that concept. And the thing is, there's thousands of people out there with great concepts. You know what I mean? If you come to someone like, I guess, Amazon or Netflix or someone like that with a studio behind you, and you come with, say, Sun Creature, or you come with Cartoon Saloon or someone like that, there's a certain level of quality and a certain there's a certain working relationship, and you know, like, over the years, say, Cartoon Saloon have built a certain reputation. So the thing is, if I pitch a show to, say, Amazon with Cartoon Saloon, that's a big difference than if I pitch a show on my own, because I'm coming with their reputation, with their stamp of approval, with all those things. And already before Amazon even look at my project, they're already saying, okay, well, Saloon, you know, give this guy the stamp of approval. They're willing to put themselves behind this person, so already you're already interesting. You know what I mean? If you're someone just coming from outside who they don't know and just who has a project, I think it can be scary, because they have, you know, you could be a lunatic, you could be any kind of a person, and there's nobody really to vouch for you. And I think that's a big thing. Or even if you're an independent, but you have a very big you have a very big presence online, maybe, and you're very well thought of. I think that makes a big difference than if you're just somebody nobody's ever heard of. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I agree with it being like that, but I can understand from a company's position of people with money that they want someone who comes with some sort of vouching from a respected person. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Also, you just mentioned something that it's like a topic in many artists that I interview, which is like the liability of maybe that someone that is not clinically crazy, but you know, and we definitely found that into this industry, like arts, animation, and all that.
Yeah.
It is very common to find people who maybe are like really talented,
Yeah.
but they are kind of crazy and not so easy to work with, especially in a team.
Yeah.
Do you have any tip or anything or any advice in order to find like to test people to see if they are good?
Test.
Yeah,
you mean like test their blood and urine before they start on the project, something like that?
Yeah, definitely, because we definitely had some experiences before where we hired people who were like, their talent was amazing, but at the time of working with them, like, it just didn't work for so many reasons.
No, I can understand.
Yeah.
I think I know what you mean, and I think those things are very subjective, and I think that's a big part of say, okay, well, put it this way, say for me, if I'm directing a project, I think it's very important for me that I cast the crew for a lot of different reasons, mostly because I want to choose everybody in the crew who's better at me than everything that I do. You know what I mean? So I want someone on the crew who's better at me than everything in every department, right? And because of that, I want to be very hands-on when it comes to recruiting people, when it comes to finding who are the right people for this project. Because also, I mean, for me, every project is as much about the crew working on it as it is about whatever's on screen. So because of that, I also feel that if I do bring in someone who is a little bit nuts or rubs the rest of the crew the wrong way, then I also take that as my responsibility because I brought them in. If I brought them in, if someone else has brought them in, then maybe it's not as much my responsibility. If someone else, if someone else vouches for this person, like we were just talking about, and says, I want to work with this person, and then they turn out to be very hard for us, the crew, to work with, then that's, I take it that the person who vouched for them, that's their issue to figure out. But in terms of dealing with those people, there's no tips, because I think these things are subjective. And but what I mean by that is someone that you or I couldn't work with because of conflict between us, the next person could work with very easily. I think some people are incredibly hard to work with all the time, and that's something that they bring upon themselves just by their own personality. But for instance, I know there's people who I've taken on crews that I've put together, where I've been warned maybe by other people who've worked with them before and told me that this person is a little bit like this or a little bit like that, and I've taken the plunge anyway because I like them or because whatever, and it's always worked out. I've never had a problem with someone like that, because if they do start rubbing people the wrong way, I'll take them aside and have a chat with them, explain what the problems are, explain why they're part of the crew, and explain the kind of problems that people have with them. And I think there is no tip to dealing with someone like this. I think it's all about people skills. It's all about being very honest with the people that you work with, and trusting the people you work with. So the fact that if you brought this person onto your crew, they're obviously there for a reason. If other people are being offended or whatever by this person, there's also a reason for that. So you need to be able to talk to them on a certain level and make them understand what the problem is. And if they can't then deal with that, that's a different thing. Because if they can't be part of a team, then they can't be part of a team. I mean, it's kind of as simple as that, you know. Some people, it's a very hard industry in terms of what we do, because we're a bunch of artists who all have very strong personalities, and you need a strong personality, I think, to be a good artist and to have a strong opinion about things. So we get all these people with very strong opinions in one place, and then we tell them all, okay, walk in the same direction, you know, tick off your boxes, come in at 9, finish at 6, you know, all those kind of things, and like stick to a deadline. And we ask them to do very ordered things all together in a group. And I think it's a very hard thing to take creative people and put them in an office atmosphere, you know what I mean? So I would be much more surprised if this didn't happen more often. I think it does happen often, and I think it's just more about making sure that, I mean, again, because if this person who other people on the crew feel is a bit crazy for whatever reason, maybe when you talk to them about it, maybe it's actually because they're quite insecure, and the reason they're lashing out at people is because of that. And if you talk to them about it, maybe that will solve the situation. So I would say that it's all about making sure that everybody knows they're part of the same team. And if it is at a point where they can't be part of a team, then taking them out of it, because you can't let the rest of your team suffer for that one person either. So
Yeah.
So yeah, big long answer again, but yeah.
Also, in all these topics, and this is something that comes up a lot, especially with people that have a lot of experience into the animation industry, is that they have to balance the art with this knowledge about business and business skills pretty much, which usually I found that many artists have problems with, because obviously becoming a good artist takes a massive amount of time. And adding that to the difficulty trying to learn business skills, which also takes a lot of time, is really hard. So how did you go about it, like trying to learn both skills?
I think I just didn't. I think I'm really bad at business and really bad at that side of things. I think it's something I still struggle with all the time. In terms of those kind of things, I'm not the best person to ask about those kind of things. I think I've learned what I've learned purely through trial and error. I wouldn't say I sit down and read business books or do anything like that. I think it's more about I watch the people I respect carefully, and I try to pick up things from them. So if I see somebody I know who handles their business quite well, or like handles what they do quite well, then I'll just either ask them for advice, or I'll try to maybe pick up why does that work for them and what am I doing differently that isn't working as well, or something like that. But I would definitely say no, I'm a terrible business person, and probably like I'm much more, you know, walking around my bare feet with a paintbrush kind of guy than a business kind of guy, you know.
Yeah, that was kind of the same answer my partner found out. Like he is like my partner is like the talent animator, and pretty much he just focused on becoming like a better artist and a better animator and such. And then he joined forces with me, which even though I just started like drawing and with interest in animation, for many reasons and things in life, I ended up like gravitating more towards business. And we found out like to join forces was like really great, because on one part, like I understand what animation is, so it's not like I'm like the businessman who sells something without knowing what it takes, but also I'm able to focus much more into all this, into the networking, into the selling. And at the same time, he can focus completely on the art, and by not having to worry that in our head, that was like a big deal for us.
No, but I can understand. I think it's definitely something that at some point has to happen in every artistic relationship. I think there's always one person who has to gravitate towards the business, purely because it has to happen. It has to happen somehow. And luckily for me, I think because I've spent the last 5 and a bit years with Saloon, I haven't had to deal with, you know, being freelance again and all that kind of stuff. But when I was doing it before, when I was working as a freelancer before, I'm not a fan of it at all. I'm not a fan of every month or every few weeks is a new contract, a new business, a new thing. I think that's a good point actually to bring up, is the fact that there's a big difference between being a freelancer and being someone who works for a studio. In terms of just the toll that it takes on you. You know what I mean? I think if you're a person who just, like you said, like your partner, if you're someone who just wants to paint and draw and work in animation and you hate business, I would say try find try find a studio or someone like, you know, a studio that you really like to work with, and then try get a position there and then work in-house, because you'll drive yourself nuts working freelance. You know what I mean? I think if you feel strongly that you want to work on your own thing and be a freelancer, but you're finding the business hard, then you have to adapt and get better at it. But I think if you're only doing that, if you're only doing freelance because you're doing freelance, I would say, yeah, try find a studio or something like that to work with, because it's not going to get any easier.
Definitely, that is something. Or even as freelance, I advise to people, like, if you really hate business, try to find a friend who is like a salesman or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's a very good thing. I think it's something, talk about directing and things like that we're talking about. Like I was saying, I tried to put people in at this head of every department who are much better than I am at everything I do. And I think just in life, in business, those kind of things, I think that's so important, to find somebody who actually likes handling the business, find someone who likes doing taxes and things like that, and not just spend all of your time, you know, not be a professional email answerer, or not be like someone who spends all their time having to look at their taxes and hates it. I think if those are things you don't like, try to clear them from your table and focus on the things that you're good at and that you do well. Not that you should ignore the hard things, but, you know, business is something that you're going to constantly do as a freelancer, and if you really don't enjoy it, find someone you can pay, or a friend or someone like that who can handle that for you, because it's just going to be something that hangs around your neck all the time. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Also, what advice would you give to the fresh blood for the people who want to join the animation ranks or the arts ranks and are starting their careers?
Sure. I guess the question is in what way? As in to get into a studio, or you mean as in terms of making their own films, or what way?
Well, mostly they are starting. Most people are starting out, especially the ones who are watching these interviews. People who are like just starting and they still like a lot of knowledge. What will be your advice on what to focus? What they should put their focus on, instead of something that, let's say, have you caught something that many people focus on, that they should not be focusing so much on that skill, or maybe something that you don't see people who are starting out doing a lot that they should?
I think that's a really hard question to answer, because I think when we look at, I think that's the other thing when we look at portfolios or whatever else, I think it's not really that we don't divide them up and say this person's a professional and this person's a new graduate and whatever else. You're generally just looking at everything together. And the thing is, sometimes you'll see new graduates whose portfolio work looks as good as someone who's been working in the industry for 10 years or 5 years or whatever. So it's hard to say from that point of view, because I'm not used to looking at new graduates' work specifically. What I would say is, if you're unsure of what to do, like if you're applying to studios and you're not really getting anything back from them, or nobody's really emailing you back, or they are, but you're not getting any work, I would say look into an internship, because I mean, I know from personal experience, I've never been an intern myself, but over the years I've known lots of interns who come into the saloon all the time, and really great people. But I think more than anything else, it gets you over that hump of kind of worrying about the expectation, or what the industry's like, or what people are like, or kind of like, for me personally, when I finished college, like, because I'd wanted to work in animation all my life, I had put the people who worked in animation kind of on a pedestal. And I've met some students who do that. Like they think like, oh, I couldn't even talk to that person because this is the person who did whatever. And they very much have that kind of feeling. And I think doing an internship and that kind of thing just gets you past that. You get to spend every day eating lunch with people and just hanging out with people. And so, like, you know, I mean, especially say I don't know what it's like in other studios, like in Some Creature and in Saloon, it was very much everybody just hangs out together. You go to the pub together. It doesn't matter if you've been there for 15 years or you're an intern who's been there for 1 month, everybody hangs out together. And I think more than anything else, it just gets you past that idea of putting people on a pedestal, and just lets you know they're normal people. And you can ask people questions about kind of, why, what's good about their work or what doesn't work. I mean, and if you ask at the right times and you ask the right person, people will be very helpful to you, because most people who've been in animation know what it's like to start off and to try to get into the industry, and they know how hard that is. And most people will try to help you because, we're all pushing the same boulders. We're all trying to do the same thing. So everybody will want to help you. So putting yourself in situations like that where you can be around your peers, I think is very important. I think what I've heard a lot of students talk about is, because I've given guest lectures as well in colleges, and people ask me similar kind of questions. And one thing people say quite a lot is they feel like when they finish college and they have their portfolios, they feel like, okay, well, my portfolio isn't good enough to go to a studio right now, so I'm going to take 6 months off. I'm going to stay at home, and I'm going to just like live on the dole or whatever, and I'm going to like just focus on spending 6 months creating the world's best portfolio. But I don't think that ever really happens. I think what really happens is they do that, and suddenly it's like 3 months later and they haven't really started yet, and now it's in there 2 months later. Okay, they're going to go at it, and then suddenly a year has passed and they're working in like a shop or working in some job they don't really want, and nothing's really moving forward. And eventually they kind of get back into the industry, but it takes a big break to get them in. You know what I mean? I think taking an internship or something like that, even at the very ground level, at least some people in the industry who can put you in touch with other people. You know what I mean? If you're someone who knows nobody and you're just hoping to pitch or to send something to, I don't know, DreamWorks or Pixar or somebody and just get a job, it can happen, but I think you have to be quite exceptional. And I think that there's also 10,000 other people trying to do the same thing. So I would say even if it's a small studio in your, like, I don't know who we're talking to in Europe, but if you come from whatever country you come from, there's an animation studio in nearly every country at this point, or in most big cities. So try find an animation studio who'll take you on as an intern, a summer intern, anything, and just try to get used to just being in a studio, being around other professionals, and try fake it until you make it. Literally just be around other professionals until you feel comfortable in that environment, because that's a huge part of it, I feel, for students, is just getting over that initial thing. You know what I mean? So I think that, I mean, more than the work, I think just in terms of your mentality, I think that's a huge, makes a huge difference.
Definitely. Something funny, this interview show, the way it started is that we got a project, an animated project that we needed to make, and it involved doing some things kind of business related that we didn't have any experience doing. And then we went to Kickstarter looking for similar projects, and we found one that was very similar to what we wanted to do. So I contacted the creator of that project to interview him and asking questions about it. And he said yes, and then I started looking who he was, and this guy was Fred Seibert.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and when I realized who was he, because at that point I was like very disconnected from the all the animation industry for many years, because again, focusing on business. When I realized who he was and all the projects that he has done, like my mind was blown. And then I realized that two things: that one, I already had like the skills to contact with like really big people, and I didn't even knew it. And secondly, that if I had knew that who he was in the beginning, I wouldn't have sent that email, because I would have thought, like, exactly as you say, like, yeah, he's too big. Like, I would have put him into a pedestal and wouldn't even try. And after that, I just kept like trying to connect with people like multimillionaires and stuff. And many times they say no, but like everyone.
Yeah, but you won't know unless you try, I guess.
Exactly. So that was like a big change for me.
But I think the other thing I just add to that as well is the fact that, like, one thing I've noticed over the years, and I think definitely rings true for, I would assume, every studio. The other thing about getting into a studio and just getting to know people is that most studios invest in people, not projects. You know what I mean? They invest in people and not really their work. So if you're a really good person who is good on a team, who's very helpful, who is very polite and nice to work with, people will generally try to find a way to bring you back. Or if you're like the crazy guy in the studio who makes everybody laugh, like I know for a fact there's one guy I worked with one time he's a lot older than me and he's been around for a long time, and we were working on a project and he was the one guy on the team who had no idea what he was doing. Like he barely even knew the software we were using. And at one point we were kind of realizing, why is this guy here? And I asked like the director and he's like, oh man, I put that guy in every team, because he's the guy at like 3 a.m. on the deadline, walking around playing like, playing drums on people's heads with chopsticks. He's just the guy who always just keeps people's energy up, and he's always a good guy to have in a room. And he's like, every project is better by having this guy on it. You know what I mean? And I think that's an extreme case, but what I mean is like very much people are investing in you and putting you on the project. So if you're very talented but you're very hard to work with, or very you don't hit your deadlines, or you keep to yourself quite a lot and you keep outside the studio, I think you'll notice that will harm you. You know what I mean, over time. And that's again why something like an internship is so important, because you get that FaceTime with people and just getting to hang out, and people get to see that you might be the greatest artist in the world, but you're a really nice person, and actually you add a lot, and you learn really quickly, and you're good at all these other things that weren't in your portfolio. You know what I mean? And I think that happens quite a lot, that interns we bring in for one thing, we actually realize just through hanging out that actually they're also great at this. You know what I mean? Like they might be someone we brought into the backgrounds, but we actually realize by looking at their sketchbooks, just their personal stuff they never show anybody, you realize this person's fantastic at character design. They're just very self-conscious. So that can happen too. You know what I mean? I think just again, being around other artists, I think is just very important. I think that's one of the main things I would say.
Yes. Also, this is a hard question that I like to ask all the people. Sure. Let's say you wake up tomorrow and you're in a different dimension. You have all your skills. You have 500 euros, but nobody knows you. And pretty much you have to start from zero to gain the reputation.
It sounds like this dimension already. It sounds exactly the same.
What would you do to get started into this position that you are right now?
How would I try to get here?
Yes, you have all your knowledge, all your skills, but nobody knows you.
Okay. What would I do? I guess I would probably make a short film. I would probably make something that I'd probably make a short film that really give a strong idea of what I'm good at. You know what I mean? I think even though it's only 500 euros, you can still make a very strong 1-minute film if you're putting a lot of your own personal time into it, and maybe spend that 500 euros on festival fees and maybe hiring like a sound designer for like 1 day if it's a very short film. But people are always looking for reasons to hire you. People are always looking to work with talented people. So what you need to be doing is just showing people that you have a talent and what you're talented at. So if I only had 500 euros and that was my only go at trying to get into somewhere, then I would try to use that to show what I can do, and then hopefully that would pay off. And if it didn't, I don't know, I'd go back to sculpting or something. Buy some clay, maybe.
Nice. If people want to find you over the internet, how they can do it?
With great difficulty, I think. I'm really not a person who puts myself out there online very much. It's funny because when you ask me to do this interview, I don't appear on camera very often. I don't really like it. So I don't do Twitter, don't do Facebook. I have no blog. So I'm pretty much just completely offline, off grid. But I would say that if you want to find me or get in contact, that my showreel is online, which is actually how you found me, and my email address is at the end of the showreel. So if you want, so basically I'm on Vimeo. So if you want to find me, just check my Vimeo account and you can find my email address there.
Nice. Thanks a lot for giving us your time and being here. I truly appreciate that you have taken your time to give us all your knowledge. So it's really great.
I mean, I'd love to give you more if I could. I mean, yeah. Well, if you ever need anything else, get in touch.
Awesome. Is Any last advice that you would like to give that we haven't talked yet?
Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to think really quickly what would my last bit of advice be. Last advice, I guess, would be to, if you're a student who's making a film, or if you're a young person, not a young person, if you're someone who wants to break into the animation industry at whatever age you are, and you want to get in, and you want to make a film, I would say that things I would focus on would be throw out anything that's not the story. I would say that there's 3 levels of writing on every film, which is basically the script, the storyboard, and the edit. Those are 3 different levels of storytelling, 3 different stages of storytelling. Your first pass is never going to be any good. And I think most importantly for me specifically, this is how I feel about storyboards, board as fast as possible, as rough as possible, and cut it all together. Cut your animatic as soon as you have basically any panels. As soon as you have like a full pass of your panels, like even very rough stage, just for you, cut your panels, see what the flows are like. If things don't really work, start replacing the panels, just find the rhythm that starts to work. When it starts to come alive, then start to clean up your panels and start to work on images. I find that a lot of time people are like spending a lot of time doing really beautiful, perfectly composed board panels and things like that, which is great if we were doing comics, but we're not, you know what I mean? None of it really matters. All that matters is the storytelling and the edit. And you need to try to find a way to boil down your images to try to tell that as succinctly as possible and not waste time on pretty images and pretty panels. So that, I would say, if I had a last bit of advice, I would say that try to, just try to focus everything on the storytelling, not on pretty images. Let them come later. You know, the pretty stuff is great, but if your story doesn't work, there's nothing to hold them up. You know what I mean? It's just a nice montage. So I would say that.
Right. Thanks a lot, and again, thanks for being here. This has been the last episode of the Creative Hustle Show. If you have liked this, then click the like button on YouTube and share this interview with your friends. Until next time.